On today's episode of The Writer's Block, I'm going to be talking about Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan, which I recently finished. I had a great time with this novel, and I really wanted to share my thoughts. I'm going to try to keep this review mostly spoiler-free. I'm not going to get into too many details with the plot, but I will be talking about the premise, the characters, the world building, and the magic system, so you've been warned. I highly recommend this book. I just tore through this thing in a couple of days, couldn't put it down. It's like all I did over the weekend. I believe this is Brian McClellan's first published novel. Published it back in 2013. There are definitely elements of it that feel like, okay, this is his debut novel. He has room to improve, but overall, I think he did a great job. I'm really excited to see where this series is going, what else this author has done and will continue to do. Brian McClellan is a student of Brandon Sanderson's, and there's definitely some Sanderson-esque elements in this. Part of this book kind of reminded me of Mistborn because you have different intermingling magic systems. It's definitely modern fantasy. There's elements of some grimdark in there, but at the same time, it's a completely different animal than anything Sanderson's written. I would say it's darker, and the characters are more morally gray. Everyone just has a rough edge to them. It's hard to say who the hero is in this story because you follow a group of soldiers, mostly a father and son, as well as an inspector, and they all have to do terrible things to accomplish what they believe to be the greater good. Yeah, war's just tough. This is a flintlock fantasy novel, so there's black powder. They're kind of on the edge of steam engines and almost Victorian era. So you have soldiers with bayonets, and it can get gruesome. There are multiple magic systems in this book. Powder mages are people that can essentially use black powder like a drug to enhance their abilities to fight. They can guide bullets through the air. If anyone else has black powder on them, they can cause that to ignite. It makes them stronger, makes their senses more acute, but it's also addictive and has a lot of negative consequences to using too much powder. So that's one magic system, but then you also have people who are what we call knacked. The knack have a knack. I don't know how else to say it. They have one gift that's a little bit odd sometimes. One knacked never sleeps. Another knacked, he never forgets anything. There's another knacked who has an ability with food where he can basically cook the most incredible meals that boost morale and heal people. And this was before Encanto, and can cook mass quantities of food. Although there might be more to this character than meets the eye, we don't quite know yet for certain. The chef character was definitely my favorite character. He added a lot of brevity and relief to the heaviness of this novel. So you've got powder mages and knacked. There's a third category of magic users, and they're called the privileged. If I understand it correctly, they have the ability with their hands to kind of reach into this, they call it the else. It's some sort of alternate dimension. They can kind of pull at different elements and weave them together. It kind of reminded me of channeling a little bit from Wheel of Time, mixed with, if you've read the Rayura Revelations, Ezra Hardin, kind of his hands are kind of the way that he kind of weaves magic together. But then there's also a fourth category that's a little more obscure, what they call bone eyes. The characters refer to these people as savages. I think they're red-haired, those red-haired savages, you know? We are savage. But their magic system is almost more like voodoo. They have simulacrums that they form out of wax dolls that they can use to harm others. They're extremely powerful. They seem like they're kind of dabbling in the same realm as the privileged. We haven't learned a whole lot about them yet. I'm excited to learn more. And then you have some kind of subcategories of magic. You have these things called wardens that apparently the privileged are able to create. They take somebody and they do something to them to enhance their strength, make them basically these brutes that are really difficult to kill. We don't really know much about this process yet. There's a lot of tension between powder mages and privileged. They don't like each other. Their magics are kind of opposites. Privileged are allergic to powder. You have entire nations that are built around this feud between powder mages and privileged. The entire nation of Kez does not like Adro. The Kez do not like powder mages. They think it's basically some profane magic system. It's inferior and all powder mages need to be wiped out. But in Adro, powder mages are lauded as heroes. But before I dive deeper into any criticisms I have of the book, I just want to state that I really liked this book a lot. I'm going to keep reading the series. These are just some things that I noticed that I thought could have been done a little bit better. I offer these criticisms out of love, really. This book moves at a breakneck pace. Basically, you're following three people. You're following a father who's the leader of a revolution, you're following his son, and you're following an inspector. You immediately start in medias res. Something big has happened for the revolution, and you start off with the inspector's point of view, but really the two main characters are the father and son, Tamis and Taniel, who are both powder mages. For me, it was a little bit jarring to get into this story, honestly, because so much had happened already. This book feels like this is actually a sequel. I really do think there's an entire prequel that we're missing that sets up a lot of rivalries that are in this book, sets up a lot of relationship tension, sets up the revolution and the problems that are facing this nation. You can get the gist of it, but some of the antagonists in this book, there's so much history there that's just kind of brushed over or restated in passing, and I felt like the payoff for some of these antagonists could have been a lot better had we had another book before this. I love stories about competing ideologies and revolution and unintended consequences. This book is nonstop action. You never really know what's coming. I never knew what direction we were really going, but at the same time, because the plot is so chaotic and unpredictable, it can sometimes feel convoluted. There are a lot of plot points that are set up and then they just end really abruptly and unexpectedly, and are often unsatisfying. Like, I would have really liked to see some of these plot points explored more thoroughly and come to a more satisfying conclusion, but it keeps you on your toes. I would have just liked to kind of know the direction we're going a little bit more and stick with it. Daniel's ex-fiance, their storyline felt really underdeveloped. I would have liked to know a lot more, and again, I think that could have been handled in a prequel. This really feels like the second entry to the story, and also Tamis and his relationship with his wife. I would have loved to see that more. I think the events of this novel with some of these characters would have been a lot more impactful had we gotten more backstory, or maybe we just needed flashbacks. I don't know. You get the gist of these relationships and their past histories, but I like to be shown, not told. You just kind of have to go along for the ride and enjoy it because the world and the characters are so great and the magic system's so fun. Without getting into any more spoilerish territories, I will say by the end of the book, the climax, I wasn't really sure what happened, and I have no idea where this story is going, and that was a thrilling feeling to me. It wasn't just like this neat wrapped up story with a bow on it. I can't wait to read the next book. Highly encourage you to go pick up a copy. I'd love to hear what you thought of the book. Have you read it? Do you plan on reading it? Let me know in the comments below, and hope to see you guys back here soon.